Okay, for the next few weeks, we're going to be discussing different principles of fitness. These principles will help you in designing a fitness plan that is tailored to your needs. The first principle that we're going to talk about today is called the principle of overload. The definition for the principle of overload is simply that in order to improve any system, an extra weight or load must be placed on that system, an overload, if you will. So if the system is a cardiovascular system, for example, you would run faster or you would run longer in order to put a load on that system to improve it. If you said, oh, I would like to improve my cardiovascular system, so I'm going to walk to my classes every day. The reason that that would not help you in the long term meet your fitness goals is because that is not an overload. It's not something extra that you do. It's something that you do every day anyway. Another example would be, let's say you decide your bicep strength, you would like to increase your bicep strength. So you pick up a pencil and you say, I'm going to do bicep curls with this pencil every day. Again, that would not be an overload because the pencil doesn't weigh enough. So the principle of overload is an extra weight or load put on a system. The equation for overload is intensity times duration. So let's look at those two words. So intensity is how hard you're exercising, and duration is how long you are exercising. So let's talk about how would we measure that. If we are doing a cardiovascular activity, first of all, let's break down cardiovascular. The word cardio means heart, vascular, vessels, lungs. Sometimes it's referred to as a cardiorespiratory system, the heart and lung system. So if you're doing a cardiovascular activity, trying to increase your heart rate, the intensity would be measured by the heart rate, beats per minute. You would take your pulse on your wrist and count how many times your heart beats in a minute. Usually when you're doing exercise, what we would recommend is taking a 6-second heart rate and then just simply adding a 0. Why? Because if you took a heart rate for an entire minute, you would already be in recovery. In other words, your heart rate would be slowing down. Duration is simply measured by minutes, a stopwatch, or a predetermined number of laps or miles. Let's say you're doing a different kind of exercise. Let's say you're in the weight room building and toning muscle. In the weight room, you would measure intensity by the amount of weight that you are lifting, pounds. You would measure duration in reps or repetitions, how many times you're lifting the weight, or sets. It's very important that intensity times duration is balanced in order to maintain a proper overload. So for example, if you wouldn't decrease your intensity, let's say you're out on the track and you slow down to where you're walking, which is fine, as long as your duration increased enough to maintain the overload. So if you decrease your intensity to walking, then instead of doing, a 10 to 15 minute jog, you might be walking for an hour to maintain the same overload. On the other hand, if you decrease your duration, then your intensity must increase. If you only have time to work out for 10 or 12 minutes, then your intensity would increase to where you're running pretty fast. So how do we do that? Well, I've talked about that, and to increase intensity, obviously, you're going to run faster. Another thing you could do is run up an incline. That will increase your intensity and increase your heart rate. You could add weight. Some people run with like vests on, something that would add weight to increase intensity. If you're in the weight room, you would simply lift more weight or change the way you lift. I'm thinking of like when you're trying to improve arm strength and a push-up. Well, you can't add more weight, But what you could do is change the way you do the push-up. You could do a diamond push-up. You could do a one-handed push-up. So those are different ways that you can change the lift to increase intensity. How do you increase duration? Well, obviously you're going to increase the time or distance. And in the weight room, you would increase the reps or the sets. So that gives you just an overview of the principle of overload.